He's under massive emotional pressure. He's watched some of his lieutenants get assassinated and also face, the meat grinder of the Ukrainian front lines every day. So he decided to pull him out of Ukraine and head towards Moscow.
Tell me, hearing earlier on from our colleague Ed Lucas, who takes the view, as many seem to now, that Putin has been irreparably damaged by all of this. Ed thinks his time may now be numbered. It may not be long before it's time for Vladimir Putin to exit stage left. What do you think?
That's certainly worthy of speculation, but I do want to be clear on the other side of that while we all watched Putin and his regime be tested as never before since he's taken power, there wasn't a single member of the Russian military command that defected, went to the Wagner side. No Russian political leaders did, not a single Russian oligarch did. So, I mean, Putin's level of control over the regime hasn't changed, at least in a direct way. But I take the point, of course, the very fact that his own, sort of disciple that he built up to create and run the largest, most powerful paramilitary group in the world decided to turn against him. Insubordination of such we've never seen against Putin, and got within dozens of kilometers of Moscow itself, does say that Putin has now faced what had previously been unthinkable, and the fact that Prigozhin, at least as of right now, is still able to give a public statement as he did a couple of hours ago, and seems to still be a free man and alive. Definitely is quite something for Putin's future trajectory.
Well, maybe the lasting real damage is that that sort of that facade of omnipotence has been shattered. You've got the Moscow Times today criticizing Putin, which would have been unthinkable not so very long ago. Other elements of the media in Russia criticizing Putin, as you say, Prigozhin doesn't sound terribly contrite, does he? I mean, look, let me get Kate and George. They've all got questions for you, Kate.
Sure.
Ian, I suppose, is that your take on what actually has happened here, which was that Prigozhin was expecting other people to join him. He was expecting to be able to push on and genuinely challenge Putin, and that when that didn't materialise, he's pulled back. Because his statement, the change in what he's saying, the change in tone is marked, and yet you're right, he remains a free man. Fine, there's a criminal investigation, but it doesn't seem to be, really taking shape with any great pace, and he's not dead yet. Is that really what happened here, you think?
I think that he was thoroughly cornered and desperate. Over the course of the last 2 weeks, there was an order from the Minister of Defense that all paramilitary troops would have to sign contracts to join the army, to become a part of the Minister of Defense. And for example, Kadyrov, the Chechen warlord, with also thousands of troops on the ground in Ukraine, they said they would declare loyalty and they'd sign these contracts. Prigozhin did not. And that was quite something, but he's been fighting publicly against the Minister of Defense, Shoigu, saying he's corrupt and incompetent and all the rest. So maybe not all that surprising. But then a week ago, President Putin came out personally and directly reiterating the order that Prigozhin's Wagner troops had to sign contracts by July 1st with the Ministry of Defense. And that basically would mean the dissolution of Wagner. And so Prigozhin would no longer have a power base. And at that point, faced with an impossible decision, he still said no, which meant that he was being insubordinate directly to the unquestionable leader, Vladimir Putin. Well, what's he going to do at that point? I mean, he's really facing a no-win situation. He's under massive emotional pressure. He's watched some of his lieutenants get assassinated and also face, the meat grinder of the Ukrainian front lines every day. So he decided to pull him out of Ukraine and head towards Moscow. I'm not in any way confident that he thought that he had people that were going to support him inside Moscow. I just think that he was dead man walking, and I kind of think he still is.
Russia blunt to the head, George.
this is incredibly hypothetical, of course, but what do you think would have happened if Prigozhin had carried on up the M4 motorway towards Moscow? I mean, we saw the defences of the city looked pretty ramshackle from what I could see of the pictures. Do you think if he'd taken troops into the capital, that could have sparked events that could quickly have spiralled out of control for Vladimir Putin?
It's possible. I mean, certainly a lot of people would have died. And Wagner did not take casualties as they moved through Rostov in the south, through Voronezh, heading towards Moscow, and then stopping on the outskirts. They hadn't taken casualties. They did knock down some Russian planes, killed 15 Russian pilots and the rest. So I expect there would have been real resistance. Let's keep in mind that the Russian forces in Moscow have a different and direct command structure up to the Kremlin. So I suspect their loyalty would have been strong. I doubt that Prigozhin would have been able to overthrow Putin, though, who knows? But what I feel much more strongly about is that this would have crippled Putin's ability to continue to maintain the defenses on the front line in Ukraine, especially in the face of a Ukrainian counteroffensive that is now gathering momentum. And I think that helps to explain why Prigozhin is still alive. This was the worst possible moment for Putin to defend himself against the Wagner army. It was, exactly when you didn't want to have a fight on two fronts. And so that meant that, Lukashenko giving the Belarusian president, giving Prigozhin an out, at least for the near term, was a better outcome for Putin than destroying this man that had suddenly turned against him and became enemy number one of the state. Again, an extraordinary turn of events, literally from hour to hour to hour. But that seems to be the most plausible explanation that we're faced with today.
And you'd think it would have sent a chill down the back of some of those genuinely loyal to Putin to see those pictures that we all saw of in the streets of Rostov when the Wagner troops arrived there, being cheered through the streets by the public in Rostov. I mean, what do I know? But it looked that would worry you, I think, if you're in Moscow.
Absolutely.
And loyal to Vladimir Putin.